Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Sports Moles Football Shorts. I'm Barney Corkhill and we're with our football editor Matt Law, and we're here to talk about game week 27 of the Premier League season. We'll get straight into it. We've got 11 games to cover because Man City have got 2 games as of Southampton. We're going to cover next Wednesday's game between them as well. So let's get straight into it. At 12:30 on Saturday, kicking the game week off is Burnley and Arsenal. Burnley picked up that point against Leicester last time out, whereas Arsenal also played Leicester last time out. A really good 3-1 win away from home, an impressive one of their better wins of the season, to be honest, that one for Arsenal. How do you see this one going, Matt?
Yeah, it's another interesting game, isn't it? You mentioned that it was pretty much a week off, and it was Sunday to Saturday to Arsenal, which is not, you don't get that much this season. A lot of teams really haven't, have those nice little break, and obviously ahead of a busy period. They've had Olympiacos, haven't they, a couple of times, Tottenham, West Ham, and I mean, it's been a tough season for Arsenal, no doubt about that. But obviously, the win over Leicester, as we mentioned when we were talking about Leicester's game, just a really, really good performance. You know, Pepe was very good. I think I did the match report for that game, gave Willian man of the match. He's the best I've seen him play for Arsenal comfortably. I thought he was really good. Injury situation is pretty good for Arsenal at the minute, isn't it? Which is always important at this stage of the season. Sitting up in 10th at the moment. They're 8 points off the top 6. I don't think they're going to finish, 6th, 7th. I do think it will be maybe around 8, 9. But if they can have a good, go at the Europa League, which you expect they will probably have too much for Olympiacos in the next round. And yeah, so it's a game. Obviously, I was looking at the previous games between these two sides, and I was surprised to learn. Burnley won at the Emirates in the earlier season, was their first Premier League win, and Arsenal have never lost at Turf Moor in the Premier League, which surprised me considering talk about Arsenal being slightly soft touch. They lost there in the League Cup in 2008, but it's actually really good. Arsenal's Premier League record against Burnley, certainly at Turf Moor. So, Burnley on the other hand, it's a good point against Leicester. You backed that, didn't you? The 1-1, and I almost went that. I should have known better. It did have a draw written all over it, didn't it? Leicester's injury problems and good performance from Burnley. They're still not out of it, are they? In terms of relegation, 15th in the table, 6 points above Fulham on the same games. I think they'll have enough to get out, but I still think they obviously still need to pick up some points here and there, and got some players back. Chris Wood coming back in. Goals are still a problem. Been a problem all season. Sean Dice actually said he's pretty pleased with the options he's got going forward at the moment, even with Barnes out. Rodriguez was on the bench and came on late on against Leicester. But yeah, I think it's going to be a tight game. I think Burnley will give them problems, but Arsenal were really good against Leicester, and I think they'll win again here, 2-1 Arsenal.
Yeah, I've gone for 1-0 Arsenal winning this one. You mentioned Burnley's record against Arsenal. Even their goal scoring record's awful. I think they've only ever scored 7 Premier League goals against Arsenal ever since being in the Premier League. They really struggle in this fixture in particular. But yeah, as you say, they did win the reverse fixture, so that will give them confidence. That was from an Aubameyang own goal, if memory serves me right. So they still didn't get on the score sheet themselves. I actually did the preview for this, and Ashley Barnes, who's missing this game, has got 3 of those 7 goals they've ever scored, and is the only player to have scored for Burnley against Arsenal, who's still on Burnley's book. So they need those goals to come from elsewhere, certainly against Arsenal. And to be honest, in general, 19 goals all season is not really good enough, and certainly why they're still in and amongst that relegation conversation. 6 points is a decent gap to have at this stage, but as we've seen with Newcastle getting dragged to within 3 points, it only takes a couple of wins for Fulham, and they're picking up points with far more regularity now, Fulham are, for Burnley to get really dragged into that. And another one of the stats that came up when I was researching this for the preview was, I think the fewest goals anyone has scored and stayed in the division is something like 28. So Burnley have got a bit of work to do to actually go and reach that figure, unless they're going to set a new record of staying up. But certainly, you need to score more goals. History tells us you need to score more goals than they have been doing to stay in the Premier League. Having said that, again, as I mentioned, their scoring record against Arsenal so poor. I don't really see them getting on the score sheet here. They are just one of those teams that will make it difficult for Arsenal for sure. But yeah, I can just see Arsenal picking up the win here. I've gone for 1-0. I think for them, particularly after those 2 wins, this is arguably as important, if not more important, than the Leicester game to back that victory up. And then obviously going before that, the Benfica win, which happened in dramatic circumstances to send them through. Starting to build a bit of momentum, starting to build a bit of form with those 2 real morale boosting wins. So they'll be desperate to get another one on the board here. And we're both backing it to do that by 1 goal margins. Also on Saturday, there's Sheffield United versus Southampton. Sheffield United picked up a very rare win against Aston Villa. I think that surprised us both, that result in midweek. Whereas Southampton fell to another defeat, 1-0 loss against Everton last time out. How do you see that one going?
Yes, I mean, it's not the Everton defeat for Southampton was not that surprising, was it, to be honest? But their run is it's horrible, isn't it? The run of form they're on, not one, we keep mentioning it since that Liverpool game during a period where, I mean, they'd started to tail off a bit, too many draws around that Liverpool win. But, first half of the season, they looked like a side, didn't they, that could potentially challenge for, top 6, top 7, certainly top half. But now, sitting down in 14th in the table, they're only, I think, 4 points above Newcastle. We talk about how Newcastle struggles. That's incredible how their form's tailed off, and they come up against the Sheffield United side that obviously we both expect. I think a lot of people do that they are going to go down this season, but I think there's ways of going down. If you go down with a fight, obviously it will give them confidence for next season. And it was a huge win, wasn't it, over Villa? Like you say, McGoldrick, who for me, he's probably their most influential player, certainly going forward. A really good goal, and this is a really tough one. This is the one that I did struggle with. Only actually been 3 Premier League meetings between these two sides. Southampton have won them all, including 3-0 earlier this season, but that was during a period early December where they were, like I say, flying. It's just a completely different side, isn't it, at the moment? Just struggling for goals. Even players like, I thought Che Adams early this season was fantastic. He's started to struggle a bit. Danny Ings, the goals have dried up. Ward-Prowse, his quality's been a little bit lacking recently. Obviously, they've had injuries, but they had to move the back 4 around, haven't they? Walker-Peters being out doesn't help, because that means, Bednarek has to go to the right back. He's played for a bit, and Vestergaard obviously has been out, but he's back in now. But it's just a bit mismatch at the back, and they haven't really, as I say, don't want to keep going about the 9-0, but recovered from that. And Sheffield United, nothing to lose. I really struggled. I've actually just gone 0-0 in the end. I think it'd be a draw. I didn't really want to go 1-1 just because there's always a lot of tight games that during this game week wasn't there, and there doesn't seem to be many goals about at the moment in general. And I just think it'll be tight. And I've got 0-0.
Yeah, this is one I went back and forth on as well. I've just sided with Southampton in the end, 1-0. But like you, I don't see many goals. I wouldn't be surprised to see it end goalless at all. Sheffield United, we know they're involved in a lot of 1-0s, for better or worse. But obviously, they've really struggled to pick up wins in general this season. They haven't picked up back-to-back wins yet this season. So the key for them, obviously, would be backing up that Aston Villa one. But as you say, it's probably come too little too late now. In fact, almost certainly come too little too late. So even if, they do get another win on the board, it's not like they're still then fighting for their lives. I think you're right to mention there's ways to go down. And I don't think either of us ever thought the Sheffield United side will go down without a fight, even, when relegation gets confirmed, and maybe on the last day of the season when, they'll be playing championship football next season. You're not going to expect an easy game against Sheffield United even then. But I think I mentioned in midweek, there are certain clubs, maybe like Crystal Palace, with the situation there. And at the moment, you might find them an easier touch towards the end of the season. But I don't think that's going to be the case with Sheffield United in any game this season. So they're more than capable of picking up the win, even if their survival hopes are looking pretty bleak at the moment. Just for pride more than anything they'll be fighting for. So they're more than capable of picking up a point or even a win in this game. I think particularly with that form Southampton on, just that such dreadful run of form. We mentioned Burnley in the last one. Southampton only 1 point better off than Burnley. So if you class Burnley in the relegation battle, I guess Southampton have to be classed in the relegation battle. You wouldn't expect them to go down, but I mean, on this current run of form, if it goes on much longer, they're certainly going to get dragged into it. So arguably a win here would be more important for Southampton than Sheffield United. And yeah, I've just sided with Southampton, but yeah, it was a difficult one to call, that one. I've gone 1-0 in that one. Matt's gone goalless. There's a Midlands battle between Aston Villa and Wolves also on Saturday. Aston Villa, as we just mentioned, on the wrong end of that 1-0 defeat to Sheffield United last time out. Wolves on the wrong end of a 4-1 defeat to Man City, but that scoreline was a little bit more one-sided than it looked like it might be at one stage. Man City with a bit of a late flurry after Wolves gave them a real scare to end that potentially end that winning run. Man City obviously did end up coming through in the end, but it was a decent performance from Wolves, and I don't think Nuno will be looking at that result and I'm feeling it should have been a 4-1. It was a bit harsh on them, but either way it ended Wolves' good revival and good recent run of form in the Premier League. But as I say, I don't think they'll be too disheartened by that one. They'll be looking at their performance and thinking it was decent against by far and away the best team in the country at the moment, arguably by far and away the best team in Europe at the moment, in Man City. So I don't think they'll be too disheartened by that one. And going into a game against the Villa side, who have been very patchy lately, obviously that 1-0 defeat to Sheffield United last time out, that followed a 1-0 win over Leeds, that followed a 2-1 defeat to Leicester. They've been struggling to get any sort of consistency going for better or worse, really. And as we said many times, they've had a really good season to be sitting in the top half of the table, having played fewer games than anyone else in the division at this stage of the season. They'll be pretty pleased with their season, but they want to prevent their season from petering out a little bit. And the way to do that is to get consistent results on the board. But having said that, this was another really difficult one to call for me. Again, I went back and forth on it. Eventually, sat on the fence a little bit and went for a 1-1 draw in this one.
Yeah, I've got on the same 1-1. Yeah, like I said, I did the preview for this yesterday, and I was just reading. Dean Smith has just actually had his press conference on Grealish, which is obviously the big one. He said he's doing better. He's still unlikely to play, but they'll decide today. So it's not he's been definitely ruled out of this game, but. In fact, he said he's unlikely, but we've seen that before. I mean, Solskjaer ruled Scott McTominay at the Chelsea game the day before, and then he was in the side. So maybe Grealish might play in this game. He's still obviously suffering a little bit, but still got players out, and Matty Cash and Wesley's back. I think Wesley's back in full contact training now for Villa, which I think they can get him back before the end of the season. He's been out for so long, hasn't he? But he's definitely a good option to have up there, because I think as good as Watkins has been, they do lack options, don't they, Villa, certainly for that centre forward position. But yeah, Wolves again, I think it'll be similar squad from the Manchester City game, 3 players out, but Willy Bolly was back on the bench against Man City, and will he come back into the side? Obviously Dendonker's played at the back, hasn't he, with Cody and Saiss recently, so you fancy you'll probably stick with that, because Willy Bolly's been out for a few games now with a knock, so maybe this isn't quite the game to bring him back into, but he might start. But as you say, both sides desperate to bounce back from really disappointing results, especially Villa. Obviously, the scoreline's worse for Wolves, but to lose 1-0 to Sheffield United But I think, as you mentioned, I think Villa are where they are, to be honest. I think, they've been spoken about, and I've mentioned them as possible top, 7. But I do think they're going to maybe finish in around where they are. They'll be looking, that top 10 as it is right now, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the top 10, with then, Villa and Leeds maybe battling to finish in and around Arsenal. Obviously, everyone else would fancy they're in the top 4 race. But yeah, I think Villa finished top 10 this season. Obviously, get Grealish back, won 12 games this season, which is really, really good. A bit inconsistent, as you say, at home. 5 wins, 1 draw, 5 defeats. So that says it all, doesn't it, about their struggles there. But Wolves, Wolves, as we say, are an improving side. Not going to be a Europa League side for next season. They're not going to finish in that top 6-7. But and they struggled on the road this season. They only won 4 of their 14 matches, 7 defeats, but they did win 1-0 at Villa Park last season. So obviously that will take confidence from that. But yeah, I just think if Grealish was definitely playing, maybe might go Villa here. Probably still go a draw, to be honest, but it'd maybe lean towards Villa more. But yeah, I just think both sides will be keen not to get beat here. So I think it'll be tight, going 1-1.
Yeah, both gone for 1-1 draws in that one. Rounding off the action on Saturday is Brighton versus Leicester. 2 teams in not great form. They met recently in the FA Cup. Leicester edged that one 1-0. But in terms of all competitions, Leicester have only won 1 of their last 5 in all competitions. Brighton is winless in 5. And after that recent revival with those victories over Tottenham and Liverpool back-to-back, they've started to really struggle again. We mentioned it in the midweek games. Obviously, Brighton weren't in action in midweek, but their last outing was that 1-0 against West Brom, where they missed 2 penalties and had that goal so controversially disallowed. And obviously, before that was the Crystal Palace game, which was they'd be absolutely baffled as to how they lost that game. So that's 2 pretty freakish games and freakish results for them in a row, how they didn't get anything out of both of those games. And it's sort of at the stage now Graham Potter will be continually pretty pleased with his side's performance and maybe the chances they're creating, but then that's been going on all season. We were saying this in the 3rd, 4th weeks of the season, that Brighton are playing well but not getting the points on the board, and it's still happening. And what are we, 26 games into their season now, and they're only 3 points clear of the relegation zone, so they just need to start putting points on the board no matter how they do it now, I think. Obviously this is a difficult game against the high-flying Leicester side. Leicester drew with Burnley last time out, which again would be regarded as a pretty disappointing result for them, but as we mentioned, they've got so many injury problems as well. So I did predict the draw in that one, and you could sort of see that coming. And Leicester might be expecting a relatively similar game against Brighton. Obviously, Brighton, different playing style, but Brighton have proven themselves difficult to beat at times. 11 draws so far this season, and only 10 defeats, which is fewer than Arsenal have lost. So they're not the easiest team to beat, and when they do lose, certainly recently, they don't tend to have lost by many goals. So it's going to be a tricky game for a Leicester side so depleted by injury. Again, as with quite a few this week, this is one I went back and forth on. Originally, I did I did have a draw because Brighton do like a draw and Leicester just not at their best. But then at the last second, I changed it to go for Leicester. I think Brighton, they're just not getting these results that they deserve. So I've gone for a 2-1 Leicester win in the end.
2-1, yeah, I was exactly the same. I had it 1-1 for a while, but I've actually gone Brighton here to win 1-0. I just think Leicester's injuries, I mean, they're back three. It was back three, wasn't it, against Burnley on Martin, Ndidi, Soyuncu. I mean, I just think I think they're having a great season, Leicester, but the amount of injuries they've got to key players, I just think Brighton, as we say, Brighton, it's not like Brighton are playing terribly. You do think something will turn at some point and they will get a result somewhere. And yeah, almost when a draw, had it down as a draw, and it was a terrible Thursday for Leicester and Manchester United, to be fair. Tottenham winning, Everton winning, Chelsea winning. That gap really is closing now, and Leicester will not be comfortable in that. Sitting third, obviously 3 points above Chelsea, 4 above Everton, but Everton got a game in hand on all of the top 4 at the moment, and Everton, really fancy, and they can push into second. I'm surprised United is still second, to be honest, with their form. But the gap is really tightening up behind them. Obviously, West Ham play Leeds. Don't think they'll be looking to win. Liverpool obviously be looking to bounce back, still in it. Tottenham. Very tight. Leicester really struggling. I just think Brighton, they've got so much to play for. They're going up against, it's not like Leicester are playing a side that is, probably a Palace or someone like that that's fairly comfortable. And Brighton only 3 points above the relegation zone, aren't they? And as you say, they'll be feeling like recently, as we say, they've just not got what they've deserved. They've played so well and hasn't come for them, but they're going to win at some point, Brighton. I fancy it might be here. Leicester's injury. If Leicester were a full squad, I'd definitely be backing Leicester to win this game. And if Leicester were flying, I'd be backing them. But yeah, just maybe gone out there a little bit. But yeah, Brighton 1-0.
Brighton 1-0 for Matt in that one. Okay, on Sunday, there's West Brom versus Newcastle. Big game towards the bottom of the table. Newcastle are in that final spot, the right side of the dotted line above the relegation zone. But like Brighton, there's only 3 points separating them from the bottom 3. West Brom are in 19th. They're 9 points adrift of safety. So this is a big game for them. This is probably must win. They lost in midweek against Everton 1-0. Newcastle drew last time out against Wolves. Both teams obviously have been struggling for form generally throughout the season and recently in particular. Newcastle will be seeing this as a really good chance to get a win on the board. Whereas, as I mentioned, I think it's must-win last chance saloon for West Brom in these sorts of games to pick up victories, isn't it? How do you see this one going?
Yeah, really tough on this one. I think the injury situation for Newcastle's got, obviously Wilson was out, but with Almiron and St Maximum now being unavailable, they've been 2 of their, certainly at Old Trafford when they lost 3-1, they were really good, those 2. And to lose those and Wilson, you're losing arguably your 3 best forward players. And you just can't, as I say, you can't afford to do that if you're Newcastle. And you say West Brom, on the other hand, good performance against Everton. Everton defended well, as they have done recently. But there's definitely been improvement from West Brom. I think they're, if they'd had this squad at the start of the season, they'd have picked up a lot more points. I still would have expected them to be in and around the bottom 3, but say 9 points from safety, it's just too much at this stage. They got 11 games left. It is too much. I think they've obviously, like I say, they've improved, and they'll not want to. I don't think it's that important to not finish bottom because you're going to get relegated, but they won't want to finish bottom. They want to. Sheffield United only 3 points behind now after Sheffield United's win. So, and they'll be looking. They're only 6 points off Fulham, and people are talking about still Fulham having a little bit of a chance. It's going to take something incredibly special for West Brom to stay up from here. And this is obviously, as you say, a game that they'd have earmarked as incredibly important, especially ahead of, they've got to play Palace away next. Palace, obviously held United, but have not got an awful lot to play for them. Play Chelsea, Southampton, Leicester. There are games for them, I think, if they can, if they could win this, just give themselves a hint of a chance. I don't expect them to stay up, but Newcastle, as you say, there's been talk of unrest in the camp, incidents that obviously not ideal for the club, and Steve Bruce's future, is continues to be called into question, which is not ideal for a club that are really struggling to stay in the league at the moment. And as you say, a huge game. But yeah, I might have got Newcastle here if they had a full squad, but the injury situation, West Brom have improved, as you say, and I think it'll be tight. And they've actually gone the second. I've only got 2 goalless draws this week, and I've gone goalless here as well, 0-0.
No, I had it this exact same until just before we came on, and I changed it, just edged to West Brom 1-0 in this one. I don't expect too many goals. You look at West Brom's last 3 games, there's only been 2 goals in them at either end. So obviously they're not scoring many, they're not conceding too many, which will obviously delight Sam Allardyce, because the early weeks of his tenure, he repeatedly went on about defensively how much they need to improve. And I think with West Brom, though the 3 of their next 4 against Newcastle, Crystal Palace, and Southampton Southampton side so out of form. I think those 3 will know after that Southampton game whether West Brom might stay in the division or not this season. If they can pick up 6 points, 7 points from those 3 games, they'll give themselves a really good chance of being still in and around it in the final weeks of the season. And then you never really know. If they go and lose 2 of those games, or maybe even all 3, then I think that's got to be the final nail in the coffin. But it's a big few weeks coming up for West Brom, I think, in terms of their survival hopes. And this one, just Newcastle, something's not right there at the moment. The way, particularly, obviously, you mentioned the injury problems. That's been pretty debilitating for them. They've lost probably their 3 best attacking players, and the sorts of players who you'd say are more match winners than anyone else in the squad in terms of Almiron, St. Maximin and Wilson. And when for a team that struggles, even with those 3 on the pitch, to create too many chances and score too many goals, that's just such a heavy loss to take. Their away form's been awful. 9 defeats from the last 10 away games across all competitions. And it's very difficult to back them. It's quite difficult to back West Brom either, to be honest, which is why I went for goalless until changing my mind at the last second. But I can see, I know West Brom's only win recently against Brighton was that ridiculously lucky one. But there definitely has been an improvement. I could just see them nicking a goal. So I've gone for West Brom to win this one 1-0. But it should be a very tight game and interesting match towards the bottom of the table. Liverpool host Fulham on Sunday, looking to end this awful run of home form. 5 defeats in a row for the first time in their entire history. I mean, you go back to, they used to be a second division team before Bill Shankly came, and never did they go on a run this poor. It's incredible what's happened, really. And I think as much as the results is the attacking performances, which is even bigger concern, arguably. Was it 1 goal in their last 6 Premier League home games? They just don't really even look like creating chances. There was nothing really against Chelsea that they created. There was that Wijnaldum header. But that was pretty comfortable, and I think that might have been their only shot on target the whole game. So they were just lacking a lot against Chelsea. It was a really disappointing performance. And if you're Jurgen Klopp here, you are scratching your head. As a fan, I'm scratching my head. I have no idea how it's gone so badly wrong. I mean, obviously, last season when Liverpool were winning every week, we knew that couldn't go on for ages. But for it to have switched so suddenly and so dramatically to losing every week at Anfield, and losing most weeks home or away at the moment, it's just, where do you go wrong? Because it's the same team. They haven't turned into bad players overnight. They're just going through a bad run of form, and maybe it comes down to a real crisis in confidence, which has suddenly come on the players after that 7-0 win over Crystal Palace. Somehow they started lacking confidence in front of goal after that, it seems. But whatever happens, they need to fix it sooner rather than later, because that defeat against Chelsea was obviously hugely damaging for their top 4 hopes. And they've got a lot of work to do. 4 points now till the top 4, certainly not an insurmountable gap. But if this form goes on for much longer, then they'll find themselves tumbling down the table. 7th place is not good enough for a team that was so impressive last season. And as I say, they'll be at a loss to explain quite how that's happened. And everyone will have them as favourites going into this game against Fulham, I think. But Fulham have been so difficult to beat lately. Obviously lost against Tottenham in midweek, but only by that 1 goal margin. Very unfortunate to lose that game. They had that goal disallowed because of that very dubious handball, which would rob them what would have been a really important point and would have taken them to within 2 points of safety. But that's their only defeat in their last 6 Premier League games. They're not conceding many goals. They're not scoring too many goals either. But they're a lot more solid team now. And if you look at the form book, I think a lot of Fulham fans will actually be pretty confident of staying up now ahead of Newcastle, because Newcastle seems to be going in one direction and Fulham's very much in the other direction at the moment. So it's a difficult one. And as much as I naturally want to back Liverpool to win this game, I'm actually going for a draw in this one. Fulham's just been very difficult to beat lately, and Liverpool just can't. Their home form at the moment is very difficult to back them at Anfield, which seems crazy to say when we consider where we were just a few weeks ago, a month or so ago. To not be backing Liverpool at Anfield in this game seems crazy, but you've got to go on the form at the moment. And I just don't see it happening. They're Fulham. Liverpool have struggled against the likes of Burnley and Brighton recently at home to break them down. Fulham, might be similar to that. So I've gone for a 1-1 draw in this one. I'm not happy about it, but I've had to.
I'm very surprised at that. I say you don't often back them, but you say you probably do that and then they'll go and win. So that's what you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I've actually just gone Liverpool here, 1-0. Expect it to be similar to you, very tight. Obviously, the Chelsea game, just say, wasn't so much the result, more the performance of Liverpool wasn't good at all, was it? Chelsea, I mean, that goal Chelsea had disallowed was ridiculous as well, wasn't it, for offside? Where Werner scored from close range. But yeah, Chelsea were really good, moved the ball very well. Liverpool, as you say, it is. I think there's a lot of different reasons, isn't there, why it is, injuries, the situation, no fans, just the situation of the world at the moment. I just think it is doing strange things to clubs, to players' performances. You'd be interested to see what happens next season. I think next season is going to be huge for Liverpool. If they could manage to just negotiate their way into the top four, I think that'd be a really good outcome. Obviously not giving up the title, but from this position, and then build again for next season, where hopefully everything will be heading very much back to normal. But yeah, it's very tough for this situation to finish in the top four, as we know. Everyone in and around that, as we say, in and around those positions will be really fancying it from Tottenham upwards, really. Very, very tight up there. A lot of things. I mean, there's a lot of games left. It's not like, we're 34 games in and there's so much football still to play, so many points still to play for. A lot of teams that are still in Europe, including Liverpool, obviously in a good position against Leipzig. But yeah, Fulham, I mean, the Fulham goal that was disallowed was just absolutely, ridiculous. His hands by his side, isn't it? I'm not sure. Obviously, the rule is correct to the way it's been applied, but the rule is just absolutely ridiculous, isn't it? You can't, and their decisions that, Fulham get a point there, gives them great confidence going into the next game, and their decisions that could determine teams going down. It's just absolutely ridiculous. But another good performance. So it's not like they're playing poorly. They're playing well, and as we know, they are difficult to beat. Yeah, I completely understand why you're going to draw here, and I would have loved to have done the same. I just think Liverpool after that, Liverpool have the home, as you say, the home form 5 in a row, first time in history defeats, is just absolutely ridiculous. But you do fancy that there is a home win coming, that they're not going to keep losing at home, keep not winning. And yeah, I just think Fulham will really have been, had the stuffing knocked out of them with that Tottenham defeat, and might be feeling a little bit, downhearted ahead of this game. And yeah, just Liverpool very tight, but I think 1-0.
I sincerely hope you're right on that one, Matt.
I don't.
At 4:30 is the big game of the weekend, the Manchester derby. Obviously a huge game whenever, but these are the top two in the table. Obviously separated by 14 points now after United's goalless draw against Crystal Palace in midweek. 3 goalless draws in a row for Manchester United. Now they need to sort that out. Whereas in contrast, Man City just keep on winning. Absolute juggernaut. They just can't stop winning at the moment. A machine just going towards the Premier League title. They're certainly champions-elect now. And when a team's in this sort of form, I think they're closing in. I think the record all-time wins from any European team is 23 or 24 from the top 5 leagues, something around that. So they're closing in on that now. So you're talking about one of the greatest runs we've ever seen in at the very top level of European football. So it's an incredible run of form for them to come into the derby. How do you see United's chance in this game of stopping that juggernaut?
Very, very difficult. I don't like backing United to get beat. I'm okay with draws, but backing them to get beat is difficult. But yeah, this is the hardest game of the season, isn't it? Certainly now. Obviously, at the start of the season, you'd say Man City and Liverpool away are the 2 toughest games you can play in the league, but not Liverpool away at the moment. It is Man City away. I just think United's performance against Palace was, I say it was awful, but it's been similar to some of the stuff they've served up recently. As you say, 3 goalless draws in a row. The Real Sociedad one obviously isn't that important because they were already very comfortable. The Chelsea one was still a decent result, and they had, the penalty gets given, they go and win that game. But the performance against Palace was just a lack of energy. There was nothing happening. No one really. There was a little, instant with Maguire and Rashford having a go at each other, but it's just not. It's just that they've hit bad form at a really bad stage of the season. I said a few weeks ago, I didn't know, even when they were winning, I still think United, everyone was talking at that stage that they were very comfortable in the top 4, and I just didn't feel like that. And they're obviously not now at all. Everton, as I say, was a bad bad Thursday for a lot of clubs, including United, with obviously Chelsea, Liverpool ideally would have been a draw for United. Everton winning, Tottenham winning. It's not good. West Ham obviously still banging that race as well. And, luckily for United, Leicester have tailed off a little bit, because I'm surprised United is still second considering their form. And actually drawn 9 league games this season, United, which is, think about Brighton and Fulham, the draw specialist 11. Behind that is United in terms of draws, which is surprising when you consider they are in the league. They've only lost 4 times, which is a good record. And as you know, their away form's been really good. I say really good, it's unbeaten away form, but far too many draws. And I think team selection for this game is going to be fascinating. It looks like De Gea's potentially not going to be involved for the rest of the month. Obviously, Martial was out of the Palace game, a couple of injuries elsewhere, Van der Beek, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a similar side for this one. I think Cavani struggled a touch. He's obviously been out for a while, but Fernandes looks like he needs a rest. But I think Fernandes he's played in so many games this season that he hasn't needed to. The one that springs to mind is the Real Sociedad one where he played the first half. It was just very bizarre. Like, he didn't need to play that game. Rashford come on at half time. He didn't need to play that game. The rest has not been ideal. And you're going up against the City side, as you say, that, we mentioned last week, didn't they? I think you called it a tombola, didn't you? That Guardiola can, go in and pluck out, 4, 5, 6 players that, Gundogan, Foden, Stones, Fernandinho, all could potentially come back in from the Wolves game. The squad is just absolutely ridiculous. They've got Nathan Ake, apart from that, no injuries. Flying high, as you say, confidence is good, and not playing loads and loads of games after each other like United are in terms of the same group of players, because they've had injuries and the quality isn't as much as it is for City. So yeah, I don't think it's the end of the world if United lose this game, to be honest. Like, say, the title challenge is gone. And as long as they manage to bounce back in the next game, it was goalless early this season, wasn't it? Between the two sides, a really, really poor game, to be honest. That was during a stage where City were almost struggling with an identity crisis, really struggling to find their way back in. But big period for United, isn't it? They play Milan, Europa League, West Ham and Leicester in the Premier League and FA Cup coming up. So defining period. But I can't see United winning. I just can't back them to go to the Etihad and win. I do think it'll be tight. I don't think it'll be, they won't blow them away, Man City. But as I say, it's very, very difficult to back United. So I think 2-1 Man City.
Yeah, I've gone exactly the same. I wouldn't be too surprised to see another one of those goalless draws, because I think United would go into this game thinking, would certainly take a goalless draw against Man City at the moment away from home. And as I mentioned last week, after the Chelsea game, I think their last 5 games against top 6 or big 6 opposition, have ended goalless, and they haven't scored in their last 6 of those. So it's a pretty common result for Manchester United in these sorts of games. But that's without Man City imposing their will on them, and that's what Man City are doing to every team at the moment. So yeah, I'm backing Man City to win this one. Their winning run is just too good to ignore. And when you compare that, I was just looking at United's form, I'm surprised it's quite that poor. 4 draws in the last 5 league games, only 2 wins in the last 8 Premier League games. So yeah, it is surprising that they've hung on to second place. And that those behind them, obviously, we mentioned Leicester have tailed off a little bit recently, but those behind them haven't closed the gap a little bit more. They would still be feeling pretty happy to have a 5-point gap over 5th place, I think, Manchester United, considering that form. So yeah, the form book certainly only points towards a Manchester City win, as it would do if Man City were playing any team, to be honest, at the moment. But in the derby, there is always that unknown. United have picked up some big results against Man City recently. They've got those players that can hurt them on the break and really make things difficult for them. But the way Man United are playing at the moment, the way they've been playing in these big games all season, it's very difficult, certainly, to see them winning this one. As I say, it wouldn't be too much of a surprise if they go and grind out another goalless draw, because that has been their specialty in these sorts of games this season. Not that United fans will particularly be happy with that being their specialty in these games, but I think they would be happy with a point at the Etihad, obviously. Not many people will expect them to come away with much from this game, but yeah, it's impossible to back against Man City at the moment, and we've said it a few times now. It's hard to see. This is on paper, this is probably their toughest match in a while. United haven't been beaten away from home in the league since January, so January 2020, that is. So yeah, they're a very difficult team to beat away from home. So on paper, this is probably Man City's toughest game in the next few weeks. So if they get over this one and win this game as we both are expecting them to, it's difficult to see where this winning run's going to come to an end, to be honest. They're just absolutely unstoppable at the moment. And yeah, we both think their winning run will continue there in the derby with 2-1 victories. Rounding off the action on Sunday is Tottenham versus Crystal Palace. Tottenham starting to find a bit of form. 3 wins in a row in all competitions, 3 clean sheets in a row in all competitions. They take on a Palace side who, the other team in that goalless draw against Man United, they made it back-to-back goalless draws for them. They're up in 13th place, 34 points. You'd probably say relatively safe from the drop now. As I say, probably need a few more points over the course of the rest of the season just to push them over the line. But this is a difficult game for them against the Tottenham sides. Obviously, we mentioned the Fulham game earlier. They were slightly fortunate to come away with all 3 points from that game, but it is another win on the board. They're in 8th place. They keep themselves in that conversation in the top 4 battle as well. And if they are to break into that top 4 towards the latter stage of the season, then these are the sorts of games they need to win, aren't they? How do you see this one go?
Yeah, definitely. As you say, need to win these games. I thought when Tottenham lost to West Ham, I thought they'd really, be out of it at that stage. But I should say responded with three wins in all competitions. Obviously, 1 Europa League, 2 in the Premier League, and as you say, they'll feel that they're still, banging that. Obviously, got a game in hand over all of the top 4, 5 points behind Chelsea. 5 points, and you just think that they are very much in it, aren't they? I mean, if they will go and win this game, they play Arsenal, don't they? Coming up and going and winning that game, it's not impossible. You talk about Tottenham's squad. Obviously, they're not defensively good enough to win the league, but the players they've got going forward, they can have a fit and firing battle for the rest of the season. Kane, Son, more than capable of firing themselves into that top 4. And yeah, they've obviously been poor during stages of the season, but instead, I think the fact they're still in the Europa League, obviously got their eye elsewhere. And they play the League Cup final, don't they, end of April with City. So they'll be obviously desperate for silverware. It's been such a long time. But yeah, ahead of this game, Palace, as you say, we're feeling fairly comfortable. The game against Manchester United, I thought, both sides, I think if Palace have had a little bit more about them, really, they really could have won that game, certainly going forward. They defended well, obviously, as you expect. Palace to Koyate was excellent at the back, and Gary Cahill was obviously a very good central defender. But Eze was excellent again. He's obviously a really talented player. Without Zaha, we know their record's poor, but they were nice and solid against United and had a couple of chances of their own, and a good point coming to this game. As you said, as we mentioned earlier, Tottenham fortunate to win. I say fortunate, they did play well, but Fulham really should have had equaliser, shouldn't they? It was a really poor decision from the technology referee to disallow that goal. But yeah, huge win for Tottenham, as I say, very much in it. And I expect them to win this game. I just think they'll would have been boosted by recent results. Got players in the final third playing really well. Palace still missing a lot of players and don't score too many, do they? So yeah, I think Tottenham will win this 2-0.
Yeah, I've gone exactly the same 2-0. I think Palace, recently have been pretty blunt going forward. Obviously, back-to-back goalless draws against Fulham and Man United, but even that Brighton game, which we mentioned earlier, only had 2 touches in the opposition box, and that one did manage to score 2 goals from those. But obviously, their performance in terms of attacking intent was pretty minimal in that game. And then back before that, drew blanks against Burnley and Leeds as well. So really, last 5 games, they haven't really shown much of an attacking threat whatsoever. So it's difficult for them to get on the score sheet in this one. I just think Tottenham have got much more to fight for at this stage of the season than Crystal Palace. And a home game against Palace looks at this stage of the season, with Palace enjoying an 11-point gap over the relegation zone now, looks like a pretty kind fixture. I think a lot of teams would like to have Palace at home at this stage of the season now, particularly a Tottenham side who are just starting to pick up a few wins. And sometimes you need those strokes of luck, like they got against Fulham, to pick up that win, just to keep the momentum going and build a bit of a run. And obviously going into the North London derby in the next league game after this, if they can pick up a win here, that's always a morale booster and a momentum builder. So they certainly consider themselves, 1 point behind Liverpool with a game in hand is incredible, really, when you consider the ups and downs Tottenham have had so far this season. So they'll certainly consider themselves in that top 4 battle. But as I mentioned, these are the games they really need to be winning if they're to do that. And we're both backing them to pick up 2-0 wins here. There's 2 games on Monday evening, starting with Chelsea versus Everton. Chelsea picked up that win at Anfield, 1-0 victory. Really good result for them. We've mentioned Liverpool in depth about how how disappointing they were going forward. But Chelsea, again, defensively looked very, very solid. And they just do under Thomas Tuchel at the moment. It's difficult for teams to score against them. Their clean sheet record and defensive record since he took over has been exceptional, particularly when in comparison to the last days of Lampard's reign as well. But they're taking on an Everton side also in good form, also in good defensive form. 3 clean sheets in a row, 3 wins in a row. They moved up to 4th temporarily just for a couple of hours before Chelsea beat Liverpool and then usurped them in 4th place. So this is 4th versus 5th, 1 point separating them. Huge game in that top 4 battle we keep mentioning. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be a really good one, doesn't it? Hopefully, it'll be live up to the pre-match billing. I think it's going to be very tight. As I said previously, I think Everton are improving side, a really good club. A lot to be excited about, and very much, just to say, in that top 4 race. Which is at the start of the season, you wouldn't have really put Everton in. I know they started well, but no one really thought they'd stay in and around those positions, and they've been down a bit, haven't they? Lost a few, as we say. They started February not fantastically, a poor home defeat to Fulham, and they lost against City as well, didn't they? But as you say, 3 wins in a row, clean sheets. Richarlison, player we mentioned last time out, obviously got the winner against West Brom, and he's in excellent form. Very, very dangerous side, aren't they, going forward? A lot of attacking talent. The midfield is so much better. I mean, looking at last season, I think they lost 4-0 to Chelsea. They did it in Stamford Bridge, and it's just a different feel about the team at the moment. You don't really feel like Everton are going to go and get turned over here and really get put away. Everton's recent form against Chelsea is actually really good, isn't it? 3 wins out of the last 4 Premier League games between the two sides. Only lost 1 of the last 6 against Chelsea. So, even though Chelsea, as you say, have been Chelsea, I mean, their performances since Thomas Tuchel come in, he's, as well as, I think Lampard did some good things there, but I think that next, step up in terms of tactical knowledge, tweaking things. I suppose that's the argument aimed at Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, that teams of that quality, Chelsea United, they're always going to win games, no matter who's the manager, because the players they've got. But if you're going to win consistently, you need maybe that next little bit of tactical knowledge that Thomas Tuchel has. Arguably, that's why I suppose United got linked with Pochettino for so long. Just that next step up to become a side that's capable of challenging for the top trophies. I still don't think Chelsea are there in terms of being a side that can go and really challenge to the Premier League. I think they've got issues going forward as well as they defend. I'm not sure that back 3. Well, obviously Thiago Silva's been out recently, but is that back 3 good enough to win a Premier League? I'm not sure. I still think they need a centre forward. They do. They're looking at Haaland, aren't they? As every major club in Europe would like him. It's just a really big game, isn't it? They'll be obviously desperate to follow up the Liverpool result with a win here, but I think Everton won 14 league games this season, which is incredible. Same as United, isn't it? It's actually more than Chelsea as well. So they're heading in the right direction. Have lost 8 times. Haven't drawn too many. Chelsea have drawn 8 though. And I've actually got a draw here. I think Chelsea obviously will be the favourites going to that game looking to win, but Everton can't be discounted. They're a really good side, and 1-1 here.
1-1. I've gone 1-0 Chelsea in this one. I can just see them edging it. I think 1-0 has been the scoreline for them recently. Obviously beat Atletico 1-0, beat Liverpool 1-0 last time out. Yet to concede a goal at home since Thomas Tuchel took over, which is a great record. And even looking back before Thomas Tuchel, their home record this season's actually been really good. I think 1 defeat in the last 18 across all competitions at Stamford Bridge. So that's a really good record they'll be looking to protect. And Everton certainly do have those players capable of certainly becoming the first team to score against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge in their new era, and even picking up a point or a win here, I think, as we've seen so far this season, they've been so impressive. But I think Chelsea are just looking like a very solid team, and I've mentioned it a few times, they've just got the foundations to build upon now. They do need to improve going forward. I think if they are to take that next step up and challenge for trophies, you need to be scoring more than 1 goal a game, which is what they've done. 3 goals they've scored in the last 4 games across all competitions. They need to improve in that aspect of it. But as we keep saying, it's still very early days in the Thomas Tuchel era, and you can't really complain about 2 goals conceded from his 10 games at the helm so far across all competitions. So I think that's the basis of their success so far under him. I think that will be the basis of their victory here against Everton. Everton, obviously 3 really good wins in a row. That win over Liverpool is the standout one, but then edging past Southampton and West Brom, 2 battling wins they needed to grind out a little bit. 1-0 wins of both of them, hanging on for getting points on the board. the performances in both of them haven't been hugely impressive, which is why I'm just siding with Chelsea. I think Chelsea have obviously got more about them than Southampton and West Brom, so they'll give Everton a much tougher test. And if Everton produce the same performance as they did in those two games, it might not be good enough against Chelsea. But then again, if they produce the same performance they did at Anfield against Liverpool, it might be enough for them to get something. So yeah, huge game for both sides, huge game for that top four battle. And obviously the carrot there is the winner will be in the top four at the expense of the other. So yeah, massive game, a lot riding on it on Monday night, but I'm just backing Chelsea to edge that one 1-0 with another 1-0 win against the Merseyside opposition. At 8 p.m. on Monday, there's West Ham versus Leeds. West Ham are up in 6th place in the table. Obviously lost to Man City last time out, weren't in action in midweek, but it wasn't a great midweek for them because obviously, as we just mentioned, Chelsea and Everton both won to move above them in the table. Leeds lost to Aston Villa last time out. They also weren't in action in midweek. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, very one of those ones, wasn't it? That looking at, and as we say, it always seems to involve Leeds when we struggled to pick results. But I just think West Ham's performance against Manchester City last time out was, I know they lost, but it was just you just felt that it's a side that's like firmly moving in the right direction, isn't it? They were very much in that game. Obviously conceded the first goal, but then equalised and then conceded a second. But just the way they played, the shape. I mean, not on the same level as Chelsea in terms of, but you just feel like the foundations are there now. There is something happening at West Ham that they've obviously got a lot to be excited about. A great stadium, and get the fans back in next season. But yeah, I just think they're a really good side now. West Ham, they Soucek, Rice in midfield is nice balance. Cookfall's been excellent as a right-sided wing back. Obviously, they'll be hoping that their first choice goalkeeper Fabianski's back for this game because he was missing, wasn't he? Against I think it was a training ground. Someone stood on his arm or something like that, and he missed out against City. But not a long-term thing. Yeah, obviously going into this game, this is the type of game West Ham really need to win. They need to be very, very careful, West Ham, because as I say, the teams around them have started to win games. It was they've dropped down to 6th now, were 4th. Chelsea, Everton, obviously winning. Tottenham only 3 points behind them now. And the fact that West Ham didn't play midweek, you just still like, I know they've had a little bit of a rest, but maybe they're wanting to play, just to get another win on the board, just to keep themselves in. They're still very much in it. I don't think they will finish top 4 this season, but they need to be careful that they don't finish 9th or something. I say that it'd still be on the face of it a fantastic season. If you'd have offered that to the club at the start of the season, they'll take it. But when you're similar to Sheffield United last season, when they were in and around there, when you drop down to 9th, 10th, it is a little bit of a disappointment because you don't know if you're going to will they ever get a better chance, West Ham, to claim a European spot for next season. What a story that would be, going to London Stadium next season with Europa League football. I don't think it would be Champions League, but Europa League football would be incredible. And yeah, Leeds, as we know, they've had a nice bit of a rest as well. Didn't play 1-0 at home to Villa, didn't they? They lost last time out, which should have been disappointing because they'll feel like Villa. They're a type of side that they should really be matching in terms of where they want to finish. But yeah, Leeds in 11th at the moment, 11 wins, 35 points. Not going down very much, can push into the top half. So it's been a fantastic season for Leeds. Obviously, the questions over the style and whether they need to change for certain opponents will remain. I don't think they'll change for this game, or they won't change for this game because West Ham aren't they're not a free-flowing side that's going to go a bit in 4-0 if they come onto them. But yeah, I think it'll be a really tight game. As I say, both sides will feel like they can hurt the other in the final third. Just gone West Ham here. Leeds, obviously, as we know, they've lost Leeds 13 games this season, which is a lot. West Ham are having a great season, 1-13. So tight game, but yeah, 2-1 West Ham.
Yeah, again, exactly the same. I think you're right when you say West Ham might have actually wanted to play midweek despite that rest, because it does sort of feel like they've lost a little bit of momentum. Even as you say, it was a good performance against Man City. They held their own for a lot of that game, but the defeat then coupled with Chelsea and Everton going above them in the table just feels like in that time off while others have been playing, they've lost a little bit of the momentum that they had been building up. Obviously that win over Tottenham before that Man City defeat was a really good win for them, a big win over some fierce rivals. So the task for them now is to pick up that momentum again, quickly bounce back from that Man City one, because as you say, a defeat here and then suddenly the perception of it all on their recent run does start to change a little bit. But 7 wins in the last 10 Premier League games. Just looking back at the teams they've lost against since September, since that home defeat against Newcastle in September, so disappointing. They've lost, I think it's 6 games, and they've all been against members of that big 6, the traditional top 6. So they don't tend to lose these sorts of games.
No.
Obviously, I mean, that top 6 is including the likes of Arsenal and Tottenham, who are down towards mid-table this season. But they don't tend to lose these sorts of games against the likes of, Leeds, those teams sort of mid-table towards the bottom half of the table. So they'll be pretty confident they're picking up with the win here. But as I say, I think it's very important that they do to keep up that momentum and start building it straight away again after a Man City defeat, but an encouraging performance. And Leeds come into it 3 defeats in the last 4 league games. We said many times how hard it is to call Leeds, and they're capable of winning pretty much any game, capable of losing pretty much any game in the league this season. But yeah, we're both backing them to lose this one, and for West Ham to return to winning ways with a 2-1 victory. We are also going to talk about Wednesday's game between Man City and Southampton. We've obviously mentioned both teams in passing already. Man City will be coming into it off the derby, so obviously that's a big game for them. We don't know if their winning run will still be continuing then, but we both predicted that it will. So it's safe to assume they'll come into this, and whatever happens in the derby, they'll come into it in better form than the Southampton side, who, as we've mentioned, are in such disappointing form. It only looks like there's going to be one winner in this game, regardless of what happens at the weekend. I mean, even if Southampton go and beat Sheffield United, as I've predicted them to, and Man City lose the derby, you'd still probably pick Man City as pretty firm favourites for this game. The way I think Southampton do need a win under their belt sooner rather than later, obviously, to build up momentum. But either way, trip to the Etihad, as we mentioned, for United is the toughest test there is in England at the moment. So whatever happens at the weekend, I think it's very difficult to back Southampton in this game. The dilemma for me was how much Man City are going to win by. I did toy with a 3-1, but in the end, I've just gone for 2-0 in this one.
Yeah, I've gone the same. I might change mine just because we've gone a few this week. I'm going to go 3-0 City in this one. I had 2-0 the same, but yeah, I'll change it to 3-0. As you say, it is difficult, obviously, to know exactly what's going to happen at the weekend. But as you say, it's not that, it won't really change your mind. As you say, exactly, it's not, even if City were to lose and Southampton to win, it's not going to change how I feel like this game's going to go. So, looking back at the recent meetings between the two sides, Southampton beat City last season, didn't they, at St Mary's? Obviously, City won at St Mary's this season, but April 2004 was the last time Southampton won a Premier League game away to Manchester City. So 17 years says a lot about what, and that's when, City, I know they had a good side when the investment came in, but even before that, they struggled against them. So yeah, I mean, Southampton's away form as well. Now it's 5 defeats in a row. Obviously it could be 6. If they lose to Sheffield United, it could be better. But as it stands now, heading into the weekend fixtures, 5 Premier League defeats in a row away from home. Just very, very difficult to back them to go into this game. And I think you mentioned earlier, didn't you? If City were to win the derby, go and win this one, you do struggle, don't you, to see where they're gonna. I mean, they play Fulham after that, fancy to win. Then play Mönchengladbach. They're comfortable in that. The 2-0 lead for the first, they go and win that. Everton FA Cup's obviously a big one. They play Leicester away after the Premier League at the start of April. I think you'll see maybe City losing an unexpected one somewhere. You'll see, like you say, they're not going to win every game. They'll drop points somewhere. Might be an unexpected one. They're so comfortable in the league, aren't they? The Champions League obviously can be fascinating for City this season. Can they win the quadruple? Obviously, hope not. It would obviously be an incredible achievement. It's very obviously difficult to do that. I don't think they'll win the quadruple. I expect them to win the Premier League, League Cup, Champions League. I think the challenge, I think they might just fall short in the Champions League. It's very difficult to know, isn't it, what's going to happen in this unprecedented season. But yeah, you went 2-0. I will just go 3-0 here. I think Southampton, as we know, are really struggling. City are flying. They'll make changes for the derby, and then you fancy 5-6 or come back in of similar quality for this game. So it'll be a fresh team, and 3-0 City.
3-0 to Man City on that one. Okay, thanks as ever, Matt. You can find all the previews for those games over on sportsmo.co.uk, as well as the championship games across Europe, all across the weekend. So please be sure to check in at sportsmo.co.uk for that. You can subscribe to this podcast on all the usual channels and on YouTube to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Myself and Matt will be back next week with our next round of predictions. So we look forward to seeing you again then.